Well, so I have many questions about my colleagues' presentations, and I think it's, mostly I'm hoping to learn some things from your experiences. But I wanted to go back to Katie's presentation, the very first one. You talked about learning about how certain pieces drove subscriptions. So connect the dots for us. How did you follow that, and how do you know what makes that happen?
So it's an imperfect science, I'll admit. We have a good sense of where. So the Boston Globe obviously has a paywall. It's metered right now. People get 5 pieces of free content. Very soon we are going to actually decrease that to 2 pieces of content before you hit our paywall. That'll be rolling out in early May. And so in a 45-day period, people can sample up to 5 pieces, soon 2 pieces before we ask them to pay. So we really don't have great analytics looking at the path to subscription, but we have a better sense than we previously did in terms of what people engage with, what people share, what recirculation, and those are the analytics that we're really paying attention to every day. And we're trying to see kind of in the path to subscription how often those kind of analytics play a role. And so that's what we're paying attention to. But previously we would do things. We would do things like photo galleries, which really we just got into the habit of doing them, right? But nobody really was looking at them, and so we had almost had an overcorrection. We knew we wanted to do more visual storytelling, but we were doing every kind of visual storytelling. And that's what I wanted to kind of get away from. I really wanted to have a sense of, for particularly our logged in users, what the kind of content they interacted with. And that's the change that we've made. And we've done a lot of what Nancy was talking about now as well. We had a newsroom that was very hungry for analytics, and so now everyone has access to Chartbeat. Every day, departments receive an email in which they understand not only what their page views were, but also what those logged in users, so logged in users are our subscribers, are looking at and interacting with. And I think we're actually learning a lot about that.
So Nancy Barnes, the Globe used a 2-site strategy to bring people into the first site and sort of train them into the pay site, and they built a very healthy subscription base, digital subscription base on that. I think others in the room have thought about doing a maybe clickier first site that would lead to a second site as well. You've said a little bit about culture. What do we need to know if we're going to go into that as newsrooms?
I think that
to make
you
that
have
work.
to be brand consistent even across the 2 sites. So where I feel that we fell down in the first couple of years is that one site had a very different brand feel than the other site, and you felt like I would, pardon me, complain like I'm going to Nordstrom shopping, but you're making me go over to Target to buy my socks, right? So I want a brand that is consistent across. It feels the same, even if one is a different type of content. That it feels like I'm visiting the same brand. I think that's really important. So in the community, people would say to me, I don't know, where's your news? I don't understand, because we didn't put much news out there unless it was a big breaking story. So we're trying to reconfigure the mix to have it, still not give it all away for free, but have it feel more, not like all traditional news, but more of the type of content they might expect from us, plus, the fun, videos and pieces about the local real estate market and people like to see inside their homes, et cetera. But brand consistency.
Stan, you have an experimentation desk that you're launching. What are we talking about here? Are we like, sort of political coverage in haiku, or what are we looking at from that desk?
Well, it's first of all, it's very experimental. It's very at its infancy stages. We really want to use that as sort of the test kitchen for innovation. I mean, that sort of is the nerve center of that. I showed you that schematic that sort of showed the digital hub in the center of the room. This is our place to bring some of our top practitioners currently. I mean, those who can perform well on Facebook Live. They can produce sort of a storify approach to their storytelling, different things. So then once we master that and that drives more traffic through to the funnel, we can start spreading it across the room. And the flip side of that is, we are definitely going to some of these things are going to fail very fast. And it's like, we're going to try it. If it doesn't work, we're going to move on. But the whole notion is like we plant the seed on that desk and we spread that DNA across the room. And again, there's no limits. I mean, we don't want to set like you're only supposed to do these 3 or 4 things. It's really, let's take the best practices from all over the industry, what's working from a really innovative standpoint, and let's put them to the test. And I think it correlates well with Jim Friedlich at the Institute as they funnel some of those, if there's an app that needs to be tested in a major newsroom, we want to be that place, but we want to be able to receive that and actually test it. Not, at the current state of our newsroom, we weren't aligned that way. So this reset is really meant to put our digital rock stars in a place where they can iterate, test, and then spread it out to the rest of the room.
Mindy?
I like the political coverage in haiku. We're going to try that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, let me follow up on that. So that sounds like a real sort of marketing guy's, catching on to a cool idea. Let's do that. When you came to your newsroom and said, all you guys are product managers, I don't know if they told you, but some of them were thinking, I don't want to be a product manager.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So did they tell you, and what did you tell them to make it okay, make them understand?
I didn't get a lot of pushback. I got a lot of questions, and I got a lot of people saying, the biggest reaction was, are you kidding? We don't have time to do what we have to do now. I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. How am I supposed to do that too? And it wasn't you're an idiot, this won't work. It was, please tell me how are we possibly going to do this stuff? And a lot of it has to be deciding what you're not going to do, right? We had a story on the front of the Metro section last week that was 13 inches long about a contractor who got busted going into court and entering a plea of not guilty. The first sentence said that. The next 12 inches were background on this story that people had seen a million times. It's a habit. And until you get out of those habits, until you say to that editor, that reporter maybe didn't have to go to that event. That reporter could have been 2 hours away from here where we've got a source who knows something about that ghost ship fire that we're trying to collect, and that person couldn't go for that because they had to cover this court hearing. You have to change. You have to first of all sympathize, right? We've lost a lot of people out of the newsrooms. We are trying to do twice as much or more with half or a third of the staff, and you have to understand that and be sympathetic to it. And you have to help people by saying, here's what you're going to drop.
We're all of us are kind of in the same boat in one sense, and I'll put it sort of in the context of Mindy's life, right? So I'm betting that if you took your message from McClatchy overlords at the beginning of this year, the message was basically, Mindy, here's less money than you had last year. I want you to go innovate. It would be nice if you were still a major force in coverage of Latin America and won us some prizes. And so how do you think about that challenge of still doing great journalism and innovating and saving the business at a time when you know that the newsroom budget will probably be smaller year over year?
I think the most difficult part is to really stop doing some things. And we just think they're important, and we keep doing them even though the traffic shows that nobody's reading it. And I'm really careful when I say this in my newsroom because there are certain things, certain coverage areas that we're always going to cover regardless, right? Those are mission-based, so I'm not going to stop covering County Hall. It's mission-based. By the way, my County Hall reporter is one of the top 10 traffic generators, so obviously he's doing something right. But even at the beginning of this year, I had to make some difficult decisions about some beats that we had for a long time that just weren't getting the kind of traffic, or quite frankly, frame it this way: do we have to do this, and do we have to do this? So I still had a part-time movie critic, believe it or not. I mean, and somehow this was shocking news in my community when I then moved my critic to another beat. But the reality is that there are a lot of places to get movie reviews. I do have a big, annual film festival, and I'll find coverage for that that's relevant. But, there are things that we can do and still get coverage that we don't have to do, so we can move our rare resources to those areas that we do have to cover.
What are you doubling down on?
I'm doubling down on government coverage. I don't think we've really figured out how to do this in a way that is interesting to readers. I think we need to move away from covering issues to covering troubles. This is, as Jay Rosen likes to say. And so I think we've tried to shift, like, for instance, our government team to like a public accountability and looking at and it's really hard. And I don't have the answer yet, so we're experimenting on that. But we're really doubling down on things that this is coverage that you can't get anywhere else. Only the Miami Herald is going to cover these sets of things, and the things that either we can get from other places or really are not mission critical. So we're going to have to get rid of some things, you know, that are maybe more fun or light, because we're going to have to move resources to.
We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure people have a chance to come down and go to the mics if they have a question. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask Nancy Barnes, what investigative stories are you considering doing that we might do instead? No, I'm just kidding. What I mean is, what are you doubling down on? What are you focusing your coverage on?
Well, you know, every year we start by identifying what our big targets could be, and then we sort of winnow them down. And I have 4 or 5, you know, big targets. One is explanatory, and 3 are investigative, and 1 is narrative. And I would love to collaborate with you on one.
Very good. Very good. Questions?
Hi, I'm Kelly Koffel from Texas State University. The profs always like getting good ideas they can steal, so I'm totally going to take Mindy's and start teaching viral video and aggregate video. But my question's for Stan. You mentioned new beats, different beats. I assume they're targeted at audience you don't have already. Can you tell us what some of those beats are and what's working?
Yeah, there's you know, one of the more competitive beats was the Trumpadelphia beat. I'm not sure why, but it happened to draw a lot of attention. You know, we've got a opioid crisis. You know, I mentioned the Trumpadelphia. We're not just, you know, grabbing all the headlines that come out of the White House these days. We are taking the Trump administration's, you know, all the changes, you know, immigration, education, you name it, all the way down the line. And we're really localizing that story. The opioid crisis is a major thing across the country, particularly in some of our suburban areas and inner city. Our homeless rate is going up, and a lot of it is tied to that crisis. So we've got to put people on that story. We had a soda tax issue, a very controversial soda tax issue in Philadelphia. In retrospect, I wish we would have placed that person a year ago when that issue was really bubbling into that space for a long time, but we didn't. So there's beats like that. You know, there's demographical segments that we are not reaching. So, you know, again, I mentioned the American Press Institute and going through 20,000 articles and sort of dissecting what came out of that. There is a lot of urbanism issues, gender, race, inequality. We're getting back to some of our public policy roots. And, you know, as mentioned previously, I think Mindy mentioned, you know, sort of letting go of some things, the commodity type stuff. Partnerships. I mean, the work that we've done with our NPR affiliate just broadens the scope of how many people reach our stories. Just a couple weeks ago, we partnered with Billy Penn for the first time, and you know, I'd like to think both groups benefited greatly. I mean, we don't have a great track record in reaching millennials. You know, Jim's group does. We put the two forces together. The reporting was great. The editing was great. The visuals were great. So these are, you know, again, back to your question about the beats. We're gonna zoom in on those things that we really know there's audience and there's potential for premium content that people might be willing to pay for, and we're gonna let go. And we just haven't had a great track record of that.
Real quick, something that we're thinking about along those lines, it comes out of our table stakes process is there one unifying theme to almost everything we do? Not everything, but almost everything we do. And we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, right? So education, transportation, housing, things like that keep coming up. And in kicking it around, we got to one sentence, which is, it's really hard to live here, and we love it, right? And now we're going back and taking that and saying, can we take that sentence or something like that and apply that to, I don't know, 60, 70, 80% of what we do. And does that start to give us the theme for reconnecting with the community in a little better way and addressing the problems, the challenges, not just the issues?
Great comment. Question on this side.
Iris Chi from UT Austin. It seems like the underlying assumption of this panel is the future of newspapers is digital. But I have two questions about your digital revenue. First thing is newspapers' digital ad revenue has stopped growing since about 10 years ago. So I wonder how you think about that. And also, last year we published a study, my co-author Ori Tenable is here, 51 metro newspapers' print and online readership in their home market. I think all your papers are included in our study. So it seems like after 20 years of experimentation with digital, now the print edition still reaches about 30% of local population. However, the online edition reaches only 10%. And online-only readership is only about 5% of the local population. So I wonder if the key to this digital-centric model is digital subscription, but given the underwhelming number of digital users, how realistic is, how many, first of all, how many digital subscribers can you get? And how realistic is it really to expect that digital revenue to make up for the loss on the print side?
Thank you for
question.
going right to the existential nature of this.
Thanks for coming. The conference is over. It's been great.
So let me take a second. So Professor Chi, we are very familiar with your excellent work and somewhat haunted by it. But I would say that what we have learned, as you have, that the digital ad revenue does not hold the key to the future. I find myself more optimistic about digital subscription revenue and the potential for making that at least a part of the solution for our company. But as you know, the Dallas Morning News has sort of a broader strategy of expanding its business reach into marketing services and other means of revenue that can support our journalism. So I'm skeptical myself about, or not skeptical, but I am aware of the depth of the challenge of making any of these digital journalism funding sources completely do the trick. And I interrupted my colleagues.
No, actually, you expressed my sentiments exactly. I don't think we think that digital advertising is part of the solution. It may be a small piece of the bucket, but it's actually a shrinking piece of the bucket. I think everybody knows passive revenue in particular is on the decline, especially now as more people moving to mobile. But even though the growth in digital subscriptions has been slow, except for the Boston Globe's had some great success, we do think that there's still a lot of hope there because readers increasingly engage first digitally, and then if there are people who used to like to read newspapers in print but now want to read digitally, we want to be there for them, and we think we can get those people to subscribe. I don't think the printed paper is going away anytime soon, but digital subscriptions are key to our future.
Got an easier question from Jeff Jarvis.
Jennifer Preston should be very proud right now to see the fruits of table stakes. And I'm delighted with so much of what I'm hearing. I think that there's a willingness to change in every newsroom. There's a thirst for innovation, which is the most important thing. There's an eagerness to collaborate and share. There's a willingness to look at things in new ways. You're waiting for the but. It's only this. Coming back next year, I have a wish. And my wish is that now that the newsrooms have been turned around, now turn them inside out and start with the public. And we call this social journalism at CUNY. Carrie Brown is here. You can ask her all about it. Woo! But, yeah, Carrie. The thing I've learned from our students in social journalism, is that by first listening to a community, not a fake community, not the whole town, not millennials, not Hispanics, but self-defined communities, understand what the community's needs are, and then we bring journalism. And then we measure our impact based on that. And if we're trying to return to trust, I hear local editors all the time say, well, we do community, we know community. Yes, to an extent. But now we have new tools to do it better. So all I'm really saying is that I think you've made huge progress, and that's what I would love to see next.
So Jeff, may I speak to that? And I'm going to give you some information about some things we're doing, and not just because I want to get an A in your class. So I've been working with my colleagues, with Robin, with Keith Campbell and others on a trust building initiative, and it includes a lot of personal connection to the audience. So just some examples of things that we're doing. Under the heading Meet the Audience, organizing public meetings at which we hear the concerns of readers about news events and about the way we do things. Inviting people in. Last week we had representatives of a group called Faith Forward Dallas that has very specific kind of political and community concerns that they wanted to address to us. So we talked to them, we invited them to some meetings. We're examining and explaining what we do. Keith is working up an idea to do a You're the Editor sort of interactive where we would present ethical challenges that editors face to readers and engage with them in that and have some back and forth. Some video explainers of our stories. Listening to the audience is a category. We already have a hotline to our I-team. There's always a member of our investigative team carrying the bat phone so that if someone calls in with an investigative tip, there's a person to talk to. We're using Google Forms to ask people, tell us your experience about being an immigrant, or tell us your experience about some other aspect of the news. We need to label our journalism more clearly. Keith gave me a great example in a meeting the other day. We had headlines on our website. The first 4 or 5 of them were clearly news stories, and the last one said, what was it? We must boycott United. We must boycott United. So, and it didn't say opinion, we must boycott United, or it just said, we must boycott United. So here, Dallas News tells you, don't take that airplane. And then finally, just explaining who we are. So both in person, but also in the pages of the paper, on the website, who are we who make these editorial decisions? Where do we come from? What's our background? And how do you reach us if you want to talk about it? I've been giving a speech criticizing the current office holder of the presidency for calling journalists the enemy of the people. But in the end of the speech, what I say is that ultimately, he's not our enemy, we're not his enemy, and we have to own up to our responsibility for connecting with readers, because if we do, we can be the best friend that people ever had, is the idea.
Jeff and I just want to add, if you remember right, at ASNE, we had a group talking about gentrification. We went into the community, tapped that group, got them into the arena. And back to the previous question, asking about beats, we have a gentrification beat. It is so big in Philadelphia, and we know now from that experience at ASNE, we have a list of 6 or 8 or 10 people who are in that space, who are good sources for us, and it's really it's a pro-con thing. It's a story that, in Philadelphia, that could be a beat that lasts for years. But
thanks for the question. Thanks all of you for listening. Thanks to the panel as well.